Hello. How
Hey,
are you, John?
I'm doing good. And how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, actually.
Pretty well. Looking
Yeah.
good. Not sick.
No, and I my coughing has subsided
Mine
somewhat
has too.
for the
I'm
last two
glad to know.
days.
Yeah, I'm glad, man. I'm happy
Yeah, I am too.
because
Let's see.
that was sucking big time, man.
Oh
Having
yeah.
to every word you feel like you're. I don't know how to explain it, but when you have that um, dreaded C-19, then that coughing, man, for me, it lasts for weeks after. And man, my lungs and my throat and just always
See,
just
mine was all allergies. Yeah, I never felt sick. Just just from being so dry here. I'm pretty
yeah.
sure.
Got
Oh
lots of chatters already starting to show up.
yeah, we got. Let
So
me see. There was Zach I saw in here. Zach Thon, Mark Tanner, Michael
yeah, man. Hey,
Lapisi,
Mark, how's it going,
Lars
brother?
Guitars, Larry, the dog pod, the one and only, the dog pod. Thanks for stopping in, guys.
Yeah, really, that's awesome.
So, what's this topic tonight?
Well, we had talked about it, and one of the things I've always you know, took me a long time to figure it out, but the live sound versus studio sound
Hmm.
is a pretty intense subject. Um, and I've got experience in both, and I thought I'd share a little
You,
bit of
you
that and
sure, you
get your
sure
thoughts
do.
on it and everybody else's thoughts on it as well. So, but maybe we ought to wait just a few minutes, let some other people
Yeah,
get in here, and then we'll get to the meat of it.
sure.
The local news has been pretty bizarre.
Yeah,
I'm particularly what sticks out in my mind is of course the trucker thing going on up in Canada.
it's like there's a lot of news here about that now.
Yeah, that's going on, and then the Joe Rogan thing. I'm sure everybody's aware
Hmm.
of. It started out with him. Um, being Spotify having an ultimatum brought on them by people like Neil Young and some of Neil's um, people, supporters, which is good. Hey, Gussie, how you doing, man? We got Michael Lapincy and Rick Hefner, Zach. But anyway, yeah, I think that kind of blew up in Neil Young's face a little bit because and then it turned from that to a straight attack on Joe Rogan on some of his past podcasts and
Right.
some of the stuff that was going on there. So, but I find it all interesting. It's just bizarre how the media has got such a weirdness about it in every aspect you think about, and canceling people and canceling ideas of people and making people wrong. I've just never seen anything like it in my life.
Hmm.
So, but anyway, that's so much for the national news and stuff. I thought it was kind
I call it depressing news,
of it is
but
depressing.
you can't. I can't stop watching it. It's
Yeah. So,
yeah.
but anyway, on to our subject matter: live sound and studio. What do you think of when I say the words live sound versus studio sound? What
Just you okay? With for me, the layman, I'm just a bedroom player, right? I'm thinking like when I would buy albums, a live album versus a studio album. To
Yeah,
me, when I would buy a live album, now you had the crowd noise and everything, but a studio album. Now this is just for me. It always sounded better.
oh
I could
yeah,
hear the detail
yeah.
better. But you can't. You've done it both ways. You recorded live and you recorded studio, so you
I've
can throw your
recorded. I've recorded both ways,
right.
and I've set up and had the privilege, if you want to call it that, of setting up live sound and setting up studio sound. Totally different worlds. Totally
Hmm.
different worlds in the way you approach getting the sound and what you're looking for on the end run. A lot of people, at least in my, in my quest for being the best I can be, I've always tried to emulate live whatever a person may have remembered on a record, be it my own recordings or be it somebody else's stuff. Even so far as when I was doing my tribute shows, we would analyze the guitar sounds or the drum sounds and try to create. I mean, nowadays it's pretty you can acquire it pretty good, with especially digital drums.
Mhm.
You can get the right kick drum, you can get the right snare sound, the right cymbals and stuff like that. So um but anyway, getting back to that, I've had the privilege of being able to do most all of those worlds. I find live sound being the most challenging, um, especially when you're doing one offs and you get there at 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock, and by the time you get everything loaded in and set up, analyzing a room and seeing where the speakers are going to need to go and all of that. By the time you get to that stage and you're really ready to start locking in on some sounds, it can be pretty challenging. Some of the things, well, you know what? Let's talk about a few things. First of all, digital versus analog. There's a lot of people our age that are still in the preference of analog, and there is a difference between digital sounds versus analog sounds, even in consoles.
Mhm.
And have you had experience in both, or
Now you can explain it to me. Well, but tell me if am I on the right track? Now, if you did it, if you would record yourself, your band, your shows, and you had people in the audience, you use analog, I assume, right? Analog recording.
no? Well,
No,
we started that way. I mean,
right.
I you know chomped down on analog from an early age because that's all that was available.
Hmm.
Digital didn't really become affordable and accessible until the late 80s, I think, maybe early
Can you
90s.
explain the difference between both to make sure
Okay,
I understand it?
so analog is where, you know, um, you have a mixing board, maybe it's
Hmm.
12 or 16 channels. And on that mixing board, you'll have a string of controls, and you might, from the very first top, it's a trim, which is your input level,
Right.
and you want to make sure that that trim is set to where it doesn't distort whatever that instrument is. And then you go down the line, and you've got a string of EQs. Um, Back in the old days, they didn't really have what they call parametric. Now, parametric is where you can dial in to a certain frequency, and you can either take away that frequency or push that frequency. And back in the old days, they didn't even have that. They only had what they call isometric, which is you had maybe a high, a high mid, a low mid, and a low. That was very common back then.
Would you mic up each separate piece of equipment?
Oh yeah,
You did it
yeah.
that way.
I In the early days, just like any, and you even do that today. That's still the norm, be it analog or digital. But the difference between digital and analog is that, at least on consoles, the biggest benefit is if I'm playing a room and I've got the same guys and the same setup and pretty much everything is the same, they have a way to be able to record that and recall those settings from when I was there a month ago. So it's kind of a memory thing
Hmm.
with digital consoles. Now, yes, technically they have a lot more to them, especially the more current ones. I I'm real familiar with the M32, which is made by um, Midas.
Mm.
And the X32, which is its sister, it's got basically the same type of head amps and same functionality, same software. But in digital consoles and even the analog consoles, they started putting, effects channels in there. Used to, you had to patch what they call outboard gear, which would be an echo or a reverb or whatever you're going to use, and you would patch those into these effects channels, and then you would feed whatever channels you wanted to go to those effects channels, and eventually you'd have a control over, somewhere over on the right on a bus to be able to send it to the system. Well, nowadays that's all done internally on digital mixers most of the time. Um, and so the differences, between the more vintage, the era, what I call, you know 80s, 90s, early 90s, until you get to the later 90s. Yeah, I mean, it was really a good mix of analog and digital gear, and the sound, obviously, in a digital world is very, very little, whereas you would get tons of noise, what they call noise floor, from the components of an analog system. And that over time they got better, and it depends on how much you put into whatever console you're buying. But the common person like myself, if I got a 16 channel PV mixer, chances are if I turned up without having any instrument in it, I could turn up the highs and hear a hiss coming out of the
Mhm.
speakers. And that's the noise floor that just comes
Now,
with it.
this thing you can record everything you're hearing too, right?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Now, would you have problems with bleed over? Let's say you got
No, not really. Not
when you
not in
we,
not in analog or digital, either one.
okay.
The the discrete, that's, when you have a discrete channel from one to the other, then usually it was pretty isolated. I mean, it depended on how they insulated the components within it, obviously,
Mhm.
because you could get some bleed or noise or whatever, on some of the cheaper stuff. But as it progressed, they were able to separate that. Now, I think what you're referring to is back in the older days in analog,
Mhm.
when they had tape.
Okay.
Tape's
Hmm.
made out of magnetic material, the ferrous oxide on the tape,
Right.
and so you could get bleed over from one head, part of the head. It was a single head, but if it was multi-track, then they had it divided into 8 channels or 16. And if you were recording on channel one, you could turn channel one down so you didn't hear what you just recorded, turn channel two up, and you could hear a little muffled
Mm.
sound of channel one coming through, hitting channel two. So you had to be careful about that. So in the digital technology, that didn't happen. You didn't have
Okay.
that because you're looking at, instead of having an analog signal, it was a digital signal. It was numbers. So there was no crosstalk like that.
Okay.
And it's the same way with consoles to a certain degree. You would have that as well. So, but getting back to the benefit started to far outweigh. Now they are challenging because usually on a digital console you'll get one screen, and on that screen, when you select a channel, then you have all those functionalities instead of having a long string of knobs to control each individual channel.
Hmm.
That it turned into very limited control, knobs for each channel, and it turned into a piece of software. And so
Okay.
you would select that channel using a button, and select channel one, and it would give you on a screen all the functionalities of the high, low, mids, all that on that screen. Now, if you took that button and you went to channel two, all that would be changed, to whatever that channel two setting was. So, as a front of house guy might, you know, be used to being able to just reach over and get channel three or channel two, and change the mids or the highs or whatever. That wasn't as easy to do because you had to go over here and thumb through all these pages of you had to select the channel and then look at it and then try to do it that way. So it was a little bit more challenging as it went on, but it got easier, and they developed the software better and all of that, So, but as far as the sound quality, you know, I think honestly you get a cleaner sound with digital, obviously, but back in the old days, if you had for instance, a Rupert Neve board, that you cannot emulate that in digital, no matter what you do. I mean, unless you get. That's why I bought a lot of the Neve, what they call outboard gear. And I don't know if you've seen the 500 series, or they're about a half rack space. They're about maybe an inch and a half wide by about that tall.
Mm-hmm.
You just line them up, and that becomes your outboard gear. But the quality, the components in those are analog components, and so you get that warmth back, and then you input that into your DAW today, and that's how you get the old sounding board sound into your new way of recording, which is the digital stuff. So
yeah, I know like some people in here, I know Bobby Lopes, he has a Tascam, I don't know how many things he can record on it, and he'll record each piece on one track or whatever, but he does it all with his Tascam, and it records it on a mic, an SD card, and he brings it, then he can bring it into his computer and extract it or edit it more. Well, I think he does.
Well,
I'm not sure if
and now they have modeling of, like for instance, the 1073 Rupert Neve modules that they have for some of these DAWs that, you can preamp, or you can send your signal, like your vocal, through that plugin, and it emulates what it should have sounded like if you had the. But I will tell you, as an experienced person doing the recordings, there's nothing like having the hardware right there.
Okay.
I don't care. You can scope both of them, and you're always going to get more of a warmth and a reality to the hardware doing it versus a plug-in. Now,
yeah, there it goes.
Dynamite plugins. Don't get me wrong.
Bobby's explaining. He says he's got a Tascam, it's analog board with a digital recorder. But when he's doing drum tracks, he'll do drum tracks for us. It sounds way better than anything,
because he's running analog through that board before it gets to the digital realm. He's giving some coloration of analog sound, and there's to me there's just a warmth about analog. It's not as clean as digital, but our human ears, really, if you get down to it, our human ears are more accustomed to the analog sound, especially our age. We want to hear that analog sound. It's like when you go to a movie. They used to shoot movies in 29.97 frames per second. That was the norm for movies, or 24 frames a second, or somewhere around in there. Well, now you've got it up to 120 frames per second, and video is really fast. That's why video looks so stark compared to a movie. And they've got it now to where they can process a digital signal that they capture on a camera, run it through a plug-in, a video plug-in, and make it look like a movie. They can do that now, and they add grain and all that stuff that we're used to seeing. If you really look at a movie, when somebody goes past you, there's a flicker, a certain type of a flicker that happens within film that video just destroys that look, because video's too fast. So that's why, some of these cameras that they came out with were the 24p cameras that were still digital cameras, but they had a 24p effect on them. And then people would shoot in that, and make it look like movies and stuff. And then on the post, then they would add a little bit of grain and a little bit of, film tint to it, to get it to look like, more movie-like. But nowadays you can do it on your iPhone. I mean, it's
what did you use for your? I know you told me, but I forgot when you did video editing.
For what, editing?
Anything, video editing.
Sony bought a company
Oh,
long time ago.
Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas, and
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, I got
couldn't
used
remember.
to it, and I still use it to this day.
Oh no, it's still good. I almost
Yeah,
bought it a couple times.
but let's get back to the sound part of all this. And like I said, setting up live sound. Yes, you mic each individual instrument. Um, the key to live sound, I think, is control, 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 as it is in a studio.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want a blasting, thing in your face coming from the stage that's going to ruin the sound that's coming through the main speakers. The main speakers today, now maybe not so much in the 80s and 90s, but now they've got it to where your sound is totally handled by the fronts and by by what you call the mains. And what you try to do is develop your sound, whatever it is that's coming from your amp. Once you're happy with that sound, you don't want, especially in small clubs, you don't want that amp to destroy what's going to come through those speakers. So if you turn it up too loud, then you can do that. You can affect what you're trying to do through the speaker. So as a general rule, what I always say, if you have a live drum set, that's going to be your lowest volume level. That's why you see people putting things in cages sometimes, even in a live setting.
Mm-hmm.
They try to cut the volume level coming from the stage so they can treat it and bring it through the speakers the way the high fidelity sound can make it. So to answer your question, yes, you mic every instrument: kick, snare, toms, a couple of overheads on your cymbals, a hi-hat, and there's several different microphones, styles of microphones that are better than others to achieve that. A D112, for instance, is a good kick drum mic. It's about, $300-400 on eBay or something like that. That's a great kick drum mic, or an RE20, something like that. That's where your big dollars are going to come from. Then from that point, if you're just, like I said, clubs, you can use SM57s or a good drum mic set that you can buy for $300 or $400, and that's going to be sufficient for that. Now, how you get it through the speakers, the key is to not allow the snare drum to pick up the tom tom drum. How do you do that? Well, here's how I do it. I'll gate. First of all, I'll set my volume on my snare, and then I'll gate it and make it close to where it's comfortable for the drummer to be able to do press rolls on and whatever, to wherever he hits it, whatever volume he hits it at, it opens the gate up and then closes back down when he's done with it.
So it'll go to a certain level and won't go past that.
Right.
With
No,
the gate.
that's compression and
Oh.
limiting you're talking about. I'm talking about gating. So
Okay.
let's say if I got a drum sitting in front of me and there's another mic on a tom-tom in front of me over there, I don't want that tom-tom mic to pick up my snare. So what I'll do is I will gate that microphone to where, and bring it down to a level to where it does not pick up the snare. It only picks up the sound when I hit that tom-tom drum. And that gate is very important. Now you can set how fast it opens up. You can set how slow or fast that it closes once it's done with it. And that is sometimes a pretty good little trick. When you've got a drummer that may play soft notes on something, you got to be really, really careful that you don't impede their playing, but you get what you want. Why that's important is now if I can isolate each and every drum, then I can EQ these drums. I can EQ them the way I want. I can, take the low end out and hit more top end and all of that. I don't want to have him crashing a cymbal and having that cymbal sound come through a tom-tom either. So there's several things to consider when you're setting up for live sound. That's why it's challenging, especially when you only have a measure of time to get it done before the performance that night. So it can be pretty challenging in the studio setting. In fact, in the live setting too, if I had my preference, and most drummers are getting more and more used to it, I have my preference to get everything as direct as I can. It's hard to do with hardliners that like a guitar amp sound, a drummer that likes a drum set. But I forced all my guys to go direct, because I wanted no bleeding whatsoever on a stage, and I wanted to be able to manipulate that sound out front the way I needed it, especially when you're working with a DAW in conjunction with live. You want to be able to balance all of that as best you can. So the way I accomplished it is I always, everything was as direct as I could make it. The only thing that becomes live is your open microphones on your vocals. And then you can gate those down to where they don't pick up ambient sound around you. You can close those down to where they don't pick up sound. So if that makes sense.
So because I always get confused. So the gate, as soon as it hears that, it's gonna close.
No. Let's say I've got two mics. I got a snare drum mic and I got a tom-tom mic.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want the tom-tom to be heard through the snare mic.
Right.
So I'll set a gate to open and close based on its threshold, how high, how hard he has to hit that to make that gate open up. And the absence of sound will close that gate to where if I hit the tom-tom, it's not strong enough to open that gate up. Does that make sense?
On the snare.
The tom-tom mic. If I'm concentrating on the tom-tom mic first, I don't want it to open up if he hits that snare. Okay. So I'll have him hit the snare and I'll look at the tom-tom mic and make sure it stays inactive.
And vice versa too.
Vice versa.
Right.
You do all the things that way. And so sometimes they're really short and you can regain your sustain with a dedicated reverb just for drums. Mm-hmm. So whereas you might hear bump, bump, bump on the tom because it's opening and closing real fast. If I put a reverb on it, it might go boom, boom, boom. You see what I mean? And the reverb will help it. You get a short reverb, and it closes it down to that, to what you're looking for. Still with the tone and all of that, but it's controlled. Now I've got a controlled tom-tom sound that's not affected by the snare because the gate is set in such a way to where that microphone is not even active when he hits a snare. Can
you throw the compression in there? What does that do?
Yeah, of course you always do that.
What does that do, compression?
Compression, what it does is that, we talked about, your head amp up at the top of a mixer. You have him hit it as hard as he's going to hit it, and you make sure it's just maybe tapping the red just a little bit, as hard as he can hit it, maybe a rim shot, and without distortion. Okay, so now your head amp is set, and then in order to give the light feel of the drum some volume and take the strong notes, if I like with this microphone, and I wish I had a compressor on it so I could show you, but if you yell, right there, there's no compression on this mic, but if there was a compressor on it, it would take it and it would do what I call a top off, and it would start to curb the volume level allowable. You've already set the distortion level of what it's going to be on a distorted level. But what a compressor will do is bring that down, and it will allow the lighter notes to be heard more because you can turn your channel up. Your lighter notes are heard now, and if he hits it real strong, it's not going to be as strong. There again, you got to be careful. I don't like to hear a compressor doing its job. I like that's kind of funny to say that. I don't like to hear it doing its job. So if you're hearing boom, 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 and you'll know when it's too much because it'll grab it and then it'll let it loose. Grab it and let it loose.
But you do use it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you have to do it like ever so where you can't tell it's on.
Yeah. What I do is I do it to the max to where I actually hear hearing it dive, and then I'll gradually bring it up until I don't hear any more dive. But now I've got control of it, and it's not going to go over a certain level. And if you look on your VU meters, either it's going to 0 or whatever you play at or whatever, So, and for me, I'm what they call a unity gain guy. Usually on all mixers, you'll see a strong line somewhere either just above half of your markers on your mixer. Sometimes they even put the letter U on it. That's called unity.
Unity, yeah.
So, if you hit that snare and it's got a great sound at unity sound and it stays there, then you know that you can always use that as a reference on all of your channels. That goes for the guitar channels, the tom-toms, the whatever. And you know where unity is on everything, that everything is nominal at unity. Then if you have a lead guitar ride coming up, you've got some space, a little bit of space at the top of that slider to where the lead guitar is coming up, and you'll push it up, 3 or 4 decibels. But home base is right there at that unity line after he's done. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what I like to do. That's how I like, as far as live sound is concerned. Let's get caught up on chat. You want to?
Yeah. God, I got to message my wife to shut the TV down. To lower the TV.
Hello, Lori. Dog Pa. PJ's in the house. Bobby Lopes. Let's see. Hurricane Moon. Guitar Hack, looks like, is here. Nice shirt, Mitch. Yeah. With no compression on my system other than what YouTube does, I had to crank it to hear the TV. Yeah.
See, I have this Elgato Wave mic I'm using. It has software. So I do have a clip guard on it, which is, if I scream, it's going to cut that.
Yeah. Now, and that's another thing. A lot of the recordings that we put on YouTube also has a system or just a nominal that they go by. And if you look deep enough into their specifications, they will tell you that, if your sound is such and such this or that, we're going to crunch it down. That's called squishing. They're going to squish it down to what their channel does. So,
right.
And there's a lot of things you can talk about with live sound. That's just a few things that we had talked about, but there are, there's all types of things, and how do you mic this? How do you mic that? What's the best way for live sound? And my best advice for anybody that's doing live sound is to always try to keep from bleeding from one mic to another, no matter what. And also try to keep the bleed to a minimum on fighting with the out front sound. So your lowest level of volume is going to be a live drum set. That's, that. Depending on how far away you are from the audience and how far you are from the console is going to make a big difference. Now, if you're in a little small club and the guy's bashing them drums, there's no way you're going to get any quality except maybe a little kick drum or whatever, because the snare volume itself, the raw snare volume, is probably going to cut through enough, the only thing that I do in situations like that is I'll do a kick and snare mic up, and I'll put some top end on the snare just to make sure that the sibilance of the snare comes through the sound system. And then I let the raw snare handle the mids and the lows of the snare. I might beef it up a little bit, just depending on what I'm looking for. So that's kind of a general rule for me on live sound. And like I said, you try to keep from bleeding one instrument to the other. That's real important, that you try to keep that as separate as possible, so that you have more control out front. There's nothing like being able to fade out a band almost, with your main um, level control on a console, and go down to nothing, and have the volume level on the stage low enough to where it really doesn't hurt anything. So on the out front sound, and that's important. You know, there again, depending on your audiences. I mean, you might be looking at being able to control the dB level. If you got an older audience, you don't want to go at 110 or 115 decibels. You want to keep it at 85 to 95 and maybe peak at 100 every once in a while, but you want to keep it nominal. You want to keep it pleasant. Whereas in a rock concert, a little bit different story. But I mean, yeah, those are all things to consider in live. So, but now in the studio, totally different ball game. You're going to there's so much that you can do in a studio, especially if you're direct. The key to studio sound is being able to capture whatever the instrument is, be it an acoustic instrument or a guitar or whatever, and isolate it as well. And you monitor it on whatever your studio monitors are, and making sure that you've tuned the studio monitors to be a good overall nominal sound. I actually tune my rooms, and then you listen to near field monitors, and I have three or four different things that I listen on to get a good sound on each instrument, and try to, not make them fight each other. I've got some recordings you wouldn't believe. Back in the 60s and 70s, they didn't have any of the tools that we have today. So some of the stuff that they did is pretty doggone awesome, how they were able to accomplish the entire sound spectrum using 4 or 6 tracks or whatever, pretty amazing stuff. So Dogpaw says, Getting Great Sounds, the microphone book. Tom Luby lives in Australia today. Priceless book. Yeah, microphones are huge and key to the type of microphone, stuff like that, so. But yeah, the recording of instruments, to me, I go direct in the studio too, except for, vocal mics,
There's a good question for Laurie about compressed files.
Well, when they say compressed files, they're adding what they call a codec. If you've ever heard the word codec, that comes into play on video and audio.
MP3 versus WAV.
What they're doing is they're not necessarily manipulating the sound itself as much as they are the size of the file. So when they say that they're compressing a file, it's like using a zip drive on a 25 megabyte, let's say you're trying to send a 250 megabyte video across, to email, and Gmail won't let you do it. So you use a codec to compress that file into a 24 megabyte file so you can send it through email. Some will argue that you can hear the difference in sound when they do that. And there are, depending on the program that you're using or the codec that you're using, yes, they have to make concessions somewhere. So if you have what they call artifacts or things that happen to the sound, and I'm a believer that it does,
and the video, yeah,
you search for the best that you can possibly use in those circumstances. And there are selections within the compressions, and it's not sound compression. We're not talking about the same thing. I'm talking about codec compression. Then what you want to do is use the least amount you can get away with. Like if you know that you can send a 100 megabyte file, yet the original file is 250, don't compress it down to 20 megabytes if you can do it, because the less that you compress that file, the better, so That's what they're talking about. Dynamic range in digital, I don't think it messes with the dynamic range, but I do think that it swipes some of the stuff or replaces it with something else to interpolate that sound. So some will argue that. I happen to think that radio stations that you hear in the car today have a digital thing about it. They're taking recordings, from whatever source they are, be it a record player or a CD that they've got going, and they run it through the airwaves, and they're doing it in microwave signals and all kinds of different ways to get that data out so they can get it to their transmitter, and the transmitter sends it to your car, that amplifier. Something happens to that sound in the process, and it to me, I've heard it on television, done that way. I've heard it on car radios and stuff like that, but it's still in the digital realm. It's just it's doing something to it. To me, it sounds like he almost out of phase a little bit. I don't know if some of you guys have experienced that, but yeah, back in the older days, when they had all analog equipment, sending the analog signal to a lot of radio stations had their transmitters right there at the site, and that's what got shot out to the radio station or the radios in your car. Yeah, and that was the best sounding radio. Even AM could sound pretty good, back in that day. So, yeah, it's pretty bizarre, some of the stuff that that can be done. So, well, I've talked for a lot. Why don't you talk about some other stuff?
Like what? No, I'm always kidding. That's just, messing around with GarageBand or even Reaper, learning what this effect does, compression, because I still get mixed up.
Right.
And
well, there's, I used to not be able to hear the difference between a limiter and a compressor.
mm-hmm.
And there's a difference in that too. I mean, there is a sonic difference between a compressor and a limiter expander, and you can hear those differences. But what a limiter does is it says, if you have decided that 0 dB is your limit, then it's not going to send that signal any higher than that.
I think I see on some of mine, because I looked at that in some videos, where there's a little spot and they'll use a limiter for that in the recording, right?
Right.
And they'll use that limiter there, and I guess it limits what we hear on that
that
spot.
Yeah. The that where that comes into play is mastering. You want to push the signal and the sonic value of your program, and when I say program, your song or your video with audio in it or whatever it is, that to me is what I refer to when I say program. So whatever your program is, you want in mastering, you want to make them sound like they were recorded almost the same day, or and if you remember, from our era, some of these bands would record over here in LA, and then they would go over here to New York and they would record channels, and then they would go over here and record, so you'd have 3 different facilities, doing, but yet when you put that album on, it sounded cohesive through the whole thing. How did they do that? How did you got 3 different studios? And, if you really listened, then you could hear the differences of the studios. But how that is obtained is through the mastering process, is keeping your limiters the same, keeping your, analyzing and listening to the low end and seeing what's pumping at this studio. And if it's not on this studio, you push it a little more on this studio, and you listen to it and over until you get everything sounding cohesive with each other, and then you make that your
here's something. It is elaborating on what you're just talking about, that comment, John.
What is the difference between why is there so different between a studio recorded drum kit and a live recorded one? It's almost too good in the studio to the point where it's just not real. And I agree. Depending on the recordings, a lot of people will use, canned drum samples, number one. And, and there's a lot that goes, with that in a recording, depending on what level of live recording you want to go after. Usually the equipment within a live sound setup, you're going to be limited to the console, the head amps in the console, the functionality of that console, and all of that is going to be your what determines the sonic value of that. And you can correct a lot of that in the studio, but remember, uh, there's limitations on a live stage versus the capturing of that same drum set, even in a studio setup, because um, you're still subjecting all of those microphones to ambient sounds that are around you. Now you can only correct a certain limit of that in a live setting. You got a guitar player over there that's for lack of a better word, blaring pretty loud right next door to you, and then how are you going to keep him from bleeding into the snare and the toms? Those things
Yeah.
are through using the gates and the compression and all of that, you that limits your ability to be able to isolate. And there again, that's that key word, isolation. As much as you can do it in a live or studio setting is the best thing, because if I can take a snare and two toms and a floor tom and have them completely isolated, so when I hit the solo switch of a snare and I don't hear anything else except for that snare, then that's what he's referring to when he says it sounds too real to be good, because they haven't allowed for when the guy hits a tom tom for it to bleed through a little bit. So, there are ways to accomplish that as well, but usually in studio settings, totally different ball game. The isolation is so, whatever. So get to bed, gang. My wife will beat me.
Thanks for stopping in, Hurricane Moon.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you so much, and everybody else.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I hope that answers that question. I don't know that it did, but
Yeah, it's not it's
I love the studio setting much better because you do have independent control over every instrument. And even, a stereo guitar setup, you still got super, super control over it. The EQ, the dynamic range of it and the volume level that's coming out and how you mix it and all of that stuff really does make a huge difference. It's hard to get that. Most live sound is mono mixed, in a live coming out of the speakers. You could do stereo out live, but it's harder to determine and hear it. You got to be pretty wide and you got to be pretty slick on how you do it.
Mhm.
Although I did it at my theater. I played. I use a stereo setup in my theater. I tried to get it as close to a studio sound as I could, and I accomplished it because, like I said, I forced all my people to go direct, so that really allowed for me to be able to get that kind of sound. So, but in the studio, the environment in a studio can be anything that you want it to be. If you want, I mean, think of how many hundreds of plugins of reverbs that we have. They've sampled this reverb sound from, this England hallway and, this church and you can get, and not only that, but you can play with the parameters of those sounds, once they give you the plugin, so you can set the decay on it. You can, you know, in a studio setting, if you hit a snare and the decay is too long because the vocal comes in, well, you can just shorten it up. That's harder to do in a live setting. You just, because you got the room to contend with, or
Now, did you ever have trouble? Could you hear if you had a sold out theater? Could you hear people? I mean,
oh yeah, you can. You mean as far as on the recordings?
clapping or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You can. Sometimes it's intentional to get that. You'll set up
Yeah.
microphones
I would think.
to capture that.
Okay. Okay.
But most of the time, you can hear them, but they're really, if you're not intending to have that audience microphone sound, then you can usually hear them responding. It's usually real weenie, you know.
But it's usually at the end.
Picked up by the vocal mic, so
it's usually at the end. I would think it's at the end of the song you're going to hear.
Yeah.
They're going to. Yeah.
But like, you know, if you take live recordings that you think they're live, and you try to you know, you try to make them a live recording, and you know, for instance, rock and roll band, you know, Boston, that's not a live, you know, that's canned sound of whatever that's made to sound like, you know, a crowd. And it's that's what that is. So, and there's a lot of albums that were done that way, you know, Benny and the Jets, the people clapping, dun, 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 dun. That's all fake. It was all, you know, canned and put in there, you know. So, but it gives you that feel of a live sound, and you know, people were really drawn to that, especially in the early years, you know. So they a lot of people became a huge success because the crowd, the canned crowd that they put in the mix, that they were, chances are they were recording it in a studio, but the canned sound of the crowd made it sound like that they were in a big concert. And so people were like, oh man, I got to go see them when they, you know, when they come to town, you know? So yeah, I mean, I've never done that, but I take that back. I've done it. I've actually captured the actual size of my theater, and in our recordings, I did put some stuff in there, you know, clapping tracks or applause tracks. You know, I would put it in there just to give that live, but it was only the sound of that applause was exact, you know, was only 150 people, you know. So you can, you know, when you download samples of applause, you can get concert level, or you can get a small room, or you can get 10 people clapping, you know. You can get samples of all of that stuff and kind of feather them into your recordings, and if you want to make them sound live, you know. And then, you know, you might do something like on your vocal, you might make it not necessarily echo, but make the milliseconds so close to each other to where you hear a little bit of almost a reverberation of a room sound, you know, get a room sound going, and that, you know, that can facilitate, you know, a live sound pretty easily. You know, you just kind of feather it in there, you know. So yeah, add all kinds of applause. That's pretty cool. So, there's some great sound effects albums out there. I remember having. I'll tell you, one of the sites. Let me see if I can pull it up for you guys to see. This site right here has been really good to me on sound effects. Let me see if it. Okay, let me. You guys need to see this one. It's called freesound.org. And you can type in here, let's say applause. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this, but you can. Now here's hundreds pages of applause. Let me just play one. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait a minute. My sound. Let me, let's see, go to audio, and how do I do? Let me see if I can.
I'm not sure if you'll be able to.
I think I can. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. But anyway, these are all kinds of different small applause, concert applause, and that this you name it, whatever you want. If you want a car crash, you know, and it's free. All this stuff is free.
Yeah, I may have used it before.
So yeah, let me see if I can.
You can put the link in the chat too if you get a chance.
Let's see if you can hear it now.
Yep.
Okay. Let me go back to the applause. Okay, here's your applause. High quality stuff too. So I mean, you can, you know, different. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know how loud that was. Sorry.
No, it was good. It wasn't bad. Wasn't.
But anyway, you know, so this site is called freesound.org, and you can get all kinds of stuff from it. You know, to go with your go with your recordings or whatever it is you're looking for.
I'm there.
I use it a lot, and it's real easy to download it, and it costs nothing. It's just an open source, and I mean they've got everything you can imagine. So yeah, there you go, Mark. Thanks a lot. So, but anyway, yeah, live sound versus studio. Mics have a lot to do with it too, a tremendous amount, especially on vocal. Usually when you're live, if you want to use a wireless mic, you're going to spend $600-700 for a good one, and it's still never going to be, a studio captured type sound. I've got
Mhm.
I've got some really good mics that they just give you that, that real dry, and then you can do whatever you want to with it in the studio. So, but Lori's funny. But anyway,
Very enlightening.
yeah, we really talked a bunch on that one, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm so much to learn. I mean, so much like how to do. I know Bobby's real good at all that stuff. Lopes and Mark,
Yeah.
He understands it all. I'm just getting into trying to learn how to mix.
Yeah, well, the key to to doing it is just do it.
Mhm.
I've always said that. The just going after it, and I think I've said this before. Had an uncle that when I was first getting into computer music, and I said, "Well, do I have to learn how to write a program for it?" Or he was like trying to explain to me, "No, there are programs already built that you use." And I had no idea about computers at the time. I mean, I was a little 23-year-old kid. But anyway, the biggest piece of advice he gave me was get your hands on everybody else that's wanting to do the same thing you're doing, and just read. He said just keep reading. And the edge of your frustration is always going to be the beginning of your learning. So when you get frustrated and you're at the edge of it, something just goes up. That's what that means. That's what it when they're saying that word, or that's um, that's the acronym that means this. Then you all of a sudden get it. And
Mhm.
it makes sense. And that's how I did it. That's how I learned a lot of my stuff. And you're welcome, Falcro. So, but yeah, I mean, it's and anytime you guys have any questions or anything about any of this stuff, feel free to reach out to Mitch or myself, and we'll get your questions answered. So because there is a lot to know. There is a lot to know, but getting your hands dirty and getting right in with it when you don't know what you're doing, you will never regret just playing around with something, because you're gonna get something. You're gonna get something, and just keep doing it. Just
See,
keep.
I took a Led Zeppelin riff from that Cashmere thing. I did it like 3 years ago almost, right? And I said, you know what? I want because I never got a lot of hits on it because it wasn't. I didn't have a title right. But it was that egad tooting or whatever gad
Yeah,
dad. Anyway, so I put it back up, and what I did was I used I originally did it with my Boss Katana 100 with it's I have software you can download with it, use as an audio interface, the Tone Studio software. So what I did two effects with that, but the second video I did, I tracked it, but I duplicated it. But I still did some effects where I made it, and then I used in Reaper. I'll be using TH3 overlay, using some different effects there. I think it came out pretty good. Just using
yeah.
it's the exact same thing. I just use all like 5 different effects really.
The danger in a lot of DAWs and stuff now is that you have so many things to choose from,
Oh, it was,
and
yeah.
you'll get your ear taste buds will go numb.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I try to limit myself to as much dry signal as I can, and then goes, okay, I'm going to pick 4 reverbs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to listen to all 4, and then I'll narrow that down to just 2. And usually on a reverb, I'll give myself a good room sound that I can turn up and down and feed, on whatever low, and then a strong long reverb, and mix those 2 together, and
Mm-hmm.
even pan one
Yeah.
left, or not left, but kind of half left, and the
Mm-hmm.
other one half right, to give it that wide feel, a little bit wider feel, stuff like that. You know, if you could literally today sit all day long and just keep going through them and through them and through them, and it's just not.
I guess my point was to see the different how they sound with different effects. Using
Right.
the
Yeah.
built-in for the Katana, and then the THU with Reaper
Now, what
and
they
Roland.
have a lot of that I have found is that you can go into some of the presets on not just the reverb, but it'll have presets for, and it'll say the word, like kick drum,
Mm-hmm.
and it has compression in it. It's got the EQ, it's got the limiting, it's got all of that preset for you for a kick drum sound, and then you can kind of manipulate what they've already done. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Those
Yeah,
are the
yeah.
kinds I really like a lot of, So
But one day we were in here, and I think Bobby was in there, and we're trying to find some kind of. We were on GarageBand trying to find a kick drum. Had a lot in there. I mean, a drum effect. I couldn't find anything I liked, and he
right.
came up with. He knew what I was trying to do, and he came up with something that was way better than anything I could find. And I might be able to manipulate it some. I didn't know how to do it, but Bobby Lips came up with exactly what I was looking for that I could play with.
Right.
But I knew it was there probably, but I'm just still learning
There
GarageBand.
again, hundreds of going through, and by the you get halfway through, trying to select a drum loop, for instance, you get halfway through it, and then you forgot what you were looking for in the
Yeah.
first place.
Now you probably understand enough. You probably mess around with drum loops, and now you know how you can edit your own drum loops if you want. You can make it sound.
Sure, yeah, I know
I
that.
don't know how to do that. You're a drum. You know how to drum. You can drum too.
Right.
I wouldn't know how to do that. So,
Yeah.
but it was easier to have somebody else
Yeah.
to do it. So
Tone knobs. No, I don't. I don't think I've ever used tone knobs on my guitar.
yeah, I don't think I ever turned mine either.
So, but anyway, we've reached an hour, man. You want to go a little longer, or do you want to stop here?
We can go 5 minutes longer if it's
Okay.
if it's all right with the guys in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they care.
Hey Les, now how you doing, Les? Yeah, I probably missed some of you people in here, but I did say hi in the chat, I believe. I called you out in chat. But it's so interesting, you know what you're talking about. And like I said,
Well, I don't know that I know what I'm talking about, but
we should do a show on motivation, which I have none of lately. How
motivation
do you
of
how to motivate yourself to play something, anything, to
Yeah.
record something. Like I'm gonna put this plug in here. Hack did this A minor blues jazzy. I'm sorry, this blues. I said it again. Well, it's a jazzy A minor jam. I'm saying
Right.
blues, but it really is a jazzy A minor. If you go to Guitar Hack's channel, I think it's his last video. You'll see it up there. Hugh Caldwell did the same thing, and they all sound great. I'm going to try to do it, and that's what a lot of us we do in here. We try to, and it's not it's not a challenge. I mean, it's not a competition. Some of you will come up with some jam track we get from somewhere, and we'll play to it. It's so fun. I mean, when
Right.
and I urge people in here to do the same thing. So I'm going to try to do something with it, but I'm not. I'm so stuck in that A minor. I mean the pentatonic, but I try to add the minor, the minor pentatonics and the major, and try to add different stuff to it. But it's going to be hard to top what Hack did and Hugh Caldwell did. But anyway, check out their channels and check out everybody's channel here. Mark Tanner, he's got some great stuff up here. You ought to check.
Oh, yeah.
I heard he did the House of the Rising Sun. I think it was Lady Rodaline, right? Rodaline, and and I think it was Hugh was on guitar, I believe, and I'm not sure who else was in it, but that was great. That came out really good. And we
Mr.
had
Mr. Cahill says, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that Bono still uses a SM58 live. I would think that that's probably true. I know that Todd Rundgren still uses a 57. I never did understand a 57 on vocals, but I had some people swear that, you just put your lips to the front of that thing and that's the best sounding mic for live. You get different people with different styles, and that's kind of the way it is. But
it's
yeah,
a,
I wouldn't doubt it that
so the Shure SM57. I mean, 58's more for singing,
yeah,
and the
it's got
57's for
more of a
miking.
kidney shaped pattern on it. So you can pull back away from it, and I don't know if you've heard this term proximity effect. You ever
I
heard of
think
that?
so. I might have.
Here's proximity. Okay. My voice to the proximity of that mic. Okay. As I get closer, the proximity increases, doesn't it? Okay. So that's called proximity effect. A 57 is instant. If you back away even a half inch from it, it'll sound like that. But
They're not
58,
they're dynamic mics, right?
yeah. But a 58, you can go like this and keep it a couple, 2 or 3 inches away from your mouth, and it's not going to lose as much. So
That's why I don't. I have an SM. I have actually I have an SM48, which is a lower end. It's a Shure,
right.
but that's why I don't use it, because if I'm not like this, you're not going to hear me.
Right. The proximity effect is not as good as some. And that is the measure of a microphone, the quality of the mic is you need some proximity effect on any mic, even a studio mic, you need a little.
Right.
Because when you're singing, you hear that distortion. You want to be able to put a screen and stop the air from getting to it without losing a lot of. I mean, if you start to move away from your mic, you start to lose a lot of bottom end and stuff like that, and a lot of the quality. So yeah, there you go.
This is a Shure SM48. Like I said, it's a lower end.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds all right to me, except I just got to be on top of it all the time.
Yeah. Well, in good studio mics, the noise floor on a microphone is going to be very low, and you can back away from it and still get good sound from it. So that's what the difference between like a Neumann versus a Sterling or an MXL or something like that, because the noise floor, when you turn up an MXL or a Sterling or something like that, you're going to get noise. Whereas in a U87, if you turn it up the same level, you're going to get a lot more gain from your mic before it starts making noise, and that's important. The U, what is it? The 150. What is that? The Neumann TLM 103. When it came out, it had the lowest noise floor of even the U87. It was really, really low. And so you could jack that thing up and be 3 feet away from it and get really good sound with no noise floor. So, that's key in a studio, is to keep that noise floor down. Of course, nowadays you can stick a gate on it, and and it goes away anyway. The gate is real important. Right now, you're hearing noise floor from my mic, probably a little bit. But if I were to go, hey man, how you doing?
It's cutting.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
cutting the
turning it off
top
and on. That's what a gate does. It opens it up, it turns it on and off. But the noise floor that you're hearing goes away, and it's the same thing with a gate. So your gate will really cut that down, but you got to be careful on how you use it. So
here's what Falco wrote.
Some people will still use a 58 in the studio too, by the way.
My Rode NT1A is too sensitive for my little homebrew studio. Even on low gain, you can hear everyone talking everywhere in the 1,200 square foot house he's in.
Yeah, I would say turn your gain down and put a gate on it, and I'll bet you'll like it.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah,
some people were saying that they can hear the TV. I don't know. Can you hear the TV? I told my wife to turn
little
it
bit,
down.
little
You
bit,
can hear it. I told
little
her to
bit.
turn it down. See, I can turn it down, and let me see.
Do you have a compressor on your mic?
It's got one built into the software here.
See, that's
Output one.
what's
It's
doing it.
down pretty good here. I can turn it down a little bit, but it's going to turn my input gain down too. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I did. But then I hate that.
yeah. I would definitely turn your mic down and put a gate on it.
Uh,
I'm talking to File Crow there, and I bet you'll love that mic if it's that good a gain. I love high gain mics that don't distort. Um, that way you can be comfortable and turn your head a little bit, and it's not really, I mean, you don't hear much difference in my voice. And when I start singing in the studio, I might, give it a little bit like that, when I'm singing, and you don't want that to be detectable in the mic. Whereas if you have a low gain mic, you're going to get, the volume level is going to, be jacked around. You don't want that, so.
right.
What's the over under in the Super Bowl?
Um,
I'm not sure what she's
Good
talking
question.
about.
The total score.
Okay.
I don't know. It's hard the way these games have been going, the way they're going. Some of the
Yeah,
games.
I wouldn't doubt it that it's going to go into overtime.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Well, I know Tom Brady isn't going to be in there.
hey, have a good night, Hack. Talk to you later, buddy.
See you, Hack. All right. Well, we had a good show.
Yeah, man.
Really, really, really good show, as Ed Sullivan would say.
Really good show.
Really show.
Yeah.
So
I'll try to keep my part, a little bit less technical.
Well, I love it when you explain it.
Okay.
Because I don't, I know nothing. I'm still learning how to play guitar after 50 years. Still learning how to play guitar.
We all are, man.
Nah, it's a never-ending thing.
Yep. It's fun though, isn't it?
Oh, here's what Mark uses: condensers, quiet studio though lets you get more dynamics in a performance.
Yes, that's true. Very true. Yep. Now we can talk tube mics versus cardioid and solid states, and
it's a whole another
total different thing, but
right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna thank everybody.
Okay.
Thank everybody for stopping in. Appreciate it. And y'all have a good week. And we'll think of something next week.
Yeah.
Even I'll think of something next week.
Now I've got my new job and I don't know what my schedule is yet.
Mm-hmm.
I went through all my preliminary background check, blah, 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 all that stuff. And it's in HR right now. So I don't know what the hours are going to be, but I'm pretty sure that I get off at 5 every day kind of deal. So I should be okay. And good to go. And I'll let you know. But, there's other guys in here you can have too.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, it's just you offered your services and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And man, it's not, I would just glamour on about nothing if I were to do this, if I was by myself. And but anybody wants to come on and talk, you're more than welcome.
Yeah.
You can get a hold of me. You can check my email or email me. You can do it through the About page. You can get my email address in there. So,
and if we also hang around in
Discord.
Of course, it's not our channel, but if anybody wants to have some extended conversations,
I have a Discord channel and
I have my own Discord as well.
You have one. Yep. No one ever goes in.
I'll get on there and just goof off, and we can do some recording in there or whatever.
Yeah, John, he can actually. What's so great about Discord, and I'm sure we mentioned it before. You could go on John's Discord. He could show you how he does something. We can watch him do it.
Yeah.
In software, that's what's so great about it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So,
but yeah, just my email. I don't know if you can type it in here. It's just basically wezonmusic@gmail.com.
There you go.
So that's what mine is. So just get a hold of me if you need to.
All right,
man.
guys. Thank you, John. I
Yes,
appreciate
sir,
it.
man.
Everybody have a good week. And I'm going to say it right now. Go Rams. Go Rams. Matthew Stafford. He deserves it.
There you go.
All right, John. We'll
All right,
see you
buddy.
later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.